Okay, welcome to the first episode in a series of Concorde adventures. From London Heathrow to Manchester Airport, which should take no more than about 45 minutes to complete. I'm going to start up the Concorde from cold and dark following standard operating procedures. And in case you haven't guessed it, I'm going to be performing all three duties of the captain, co-pilot and flight engineer. So let us get started. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load the route, which I've already set up, and it is the London to Manchester one. It's going to be a subsonic flight for the most part, and we're going to generate a random payload and continue. The taxi is quite short, so we don't need a lot of taxi fuel. So let it compute. The departure runway I'm going to change to 27 left and fly the standard Crompton standard international departure. I'm going to recalculate it. So the Crompton departure is, we'll fly away from the London VOR 113.60 on a course of 256. At London 7 DME, we'll then turn right to a QDM of 271 and fly directly to the Woodley NDB. Once we reach Woodley, we will then fly heading 282 and direct to Crompton. So I'm just setting up the AFCS for that purpose, and I'm going to dial in 6,000 feet to start off with. We can print our flight data like so and open it up, and we can check all the values. Finally, the takeoff data, we have a V1 of 132 knots, a rotator 174, so I'll plug that into the speed indicator, and a V2 of 199 knots. Initial pitch index is 17 degrees, a CG of 53 corresponding to a trim of 1.5. Noise abatement is 45 seconds. Set both sides. With that out of the way, we can press on with our cockpit flows very fast. So the AFCS is checked, RAD INS switches are set to radio. We can now come over here and test the warning and landing light display. We can test the terrain GPWS. We can test the HSI deviation. That's the first officer side. And bring the instrument transfer switches back to each side respectively. You can test the radio altimeter, gauge the standby ADI, and test the outer, middle and inner markers as so. You can finally test the HSI as well as testing the rest of the equipment, including the takeoff monitor, the flight control position indicator, FGDI, and also other items in the cockpit. Come over here and test the throttle amp warnings. We can test the ADF receivers, which are set to 352 Woodley. You can turn the air data computers on. This is necessary for the flight instruments, particularly the airspeed indicator, to work, and we can test those looking for the stall and the overspeed warning to occur at the same time. Can test the landing gear horn and the rest of the annunciator lights as well. Okay, you can reset our nose wheel steering and test that as well. And the anti-skid as well. Okay, the tests are successful. We'll now press on with our overhead cockpit scans. Turn the nav lights on. These let us know that the aircraft is powered. The emergency lights are armed. In the case of an electrical failure, they'll illuminate passengers to the emergency exit. Can test the emergency evacuation and cancel it. You can right click the ground call button to start refueling. Let's put the no smoking and seatbelt signs on. The roof lights are on. Engine flight rating is set to climb. The train masters can remain off for the time being. Throttle masters we can set to main. Auto ignition should be off for the time being because we're performing a manual start. Auto throttles can go on. Engine rating mode set to takeoff. The high pressure fuel flow switches are off. We can now test auto stab 1 that is custom and observe that it engages successfully. Put the flight control inverters on. Anti-stall systems, they're both on. ADS and probe heaters we set to total temperature inhibit to avoid faults, total temperature or TMO readings on the ground. And the standby system goes to on. You can adjust our roof lighting as well as required. Engine anti-icing, wing anti-icing remains off. The fuel forward transfer override switch is off and guarded. We can now do an annunciator light test. Test the inhibit, recall and lights test. The test is successful. Pressing on with the flight engineer's flows. Ground power is set as verified over here with a frequency of 400 Hertz and also 115 volts. The tolerance generally for these generation aircraft is 115 volts plus or minus 5 volts and 400 Hertz plus or minus 8 cycles per second. Equipment cooling is set. And we can press on with the cockpit flows for the flight engineer. We can do a ground hydraulic checkout. We can put the electrical pumps on and test the blue-green system, which is now pressurized over here, and the yellow and green. We can now test the yellow and blue system as well as the green and blue system as well, and we turn that finally to yellow and off like so. The chronometers will be used later when we are doing our engine start. Brake fans are off for now. We can test the air intake master warnings. Ensure the inlet lane channels are set to auto A or auto B, as these are computer controlled. The hydraulic selector for the intakes are on auto. The ramp spill masters are on auto with guard set. Auxiliary inlets are open. That's all set and checked. We can test the inverters for the rat turbine and ensure that they are powered. And we can also then test the master warnings for the fire detectors as well. We can do a fuel vent test as well, and a door test as well to ensure that all door lights are working correctly. We We can also do an annunciator light test of the first part of the flight engineer's panel, noticing that all lights are functional and nothing is burnt out. We can set our cabin altitude. Today we'll set it to 5,000 feet. And we're not using real-time weather, so I won't apply any barometric corrections. Vertical speed is normal. Test the engine overheat warnings, the wing nacelle overheat, and the rest of the master warning systems. Okay, engine control schedule. We're set to fly over for the noise abatement. The fuel heaters are auto, engine recirculars are shut, secondary air doors are selected auto, the flight reverser arm switch is off, engine idle switches are set to low. Coming over here to the air conditioning panel, we're going to request ground air. We're going to close the engine bleed control valves. They are not needed at the time being. And turn on the number 2 and number 3 cross bleeds. Air conditioning remains on. And temperature control will set to auto. All of them in the 12 o'clock auto position. Now for the fuel management, the most feared part in Concorde. We have fuel in tanks 9, tanks 11. No, we don't have in tank 11. We have fuel in tank 9, nothing in tank 10, and nothing in tank 11. We have fuel in all the engine feed tanks, and nothing in tanks 5, 6, 7, or 8. We do have a bit of fuel in tanks 5A and 7A, which will be emptied later on. So we'll set the inlets to tank 9 to auto and the overrides to off. The pumps for tank 9 will select auto. The D air can remain off for the time being. Standby inlets for the rest of the fuel tanks are shut. The trim drain pipe and the interconnect valve between tanks 5 and 5A and tanks 7 and 7A are shut. Tank 10 pumps can remain off as there's no fuel in tank 10, as well as tanks 5 and 7 and 6 and 8. The inlets again for tank 11 are set to auto and the overrides to shut. The blue and green hydraulics for tank 11 pumps are set to auto, and also the electric pumps as well to auto. Cross feeds are shut. Inline engine feed pumps, the main ones are turned on. The auxiliaries remain off for the time being. You can also test the low fuel level master warning, as well as the leak and the low pressure. The fuel panel is set. Pressing on to the final part, the electrics, the hydraulic, quantity indicators are all in green range. They are off for the time being. The engine driven hydraulics, hydraulic temperature is checked. Electrics are also checked. The ground power was established long ago. The split circuit breaker is shut, energizing all the bus tie breakers. We can also reset the engine driven generators to ensure that they come online when the engines start, and also ensure that they are paralleled as well. Okay, emergency generator selection is set to ground bypass. The rest of the essential buses are set to normal, and everything is set. The galley power we can turn on as well. The nozzle override switches are set to normal. We can do an engine fire test finally. Observing the fire handles flashing for each engine. and then we'll cancel it. And put the rotary selector back to normal. Okay, so that's pretty much all the functional tests for the rest of the cockpit. We've established that all systems are set, checked, and are working correctly. Right, now it is time to set the waypoints into the INS. So we have to set every waypoint as per its latitude and longitude. The present position is already set to the ramp, and now we set our waypoints. So the first waypoint is the Woodley NDB, which has coordinates of, standby, it has north 51272, insert west 527, insert. Waypoint 2, which is Crompton, north 51295, insert west 1132, insert. The next waypoint is waypoint number 3, north 51316, insert west 1098, insert. Now checking out the next major waypoint is the Trent VOR, waypoint number 4, north 53032, insert west 1402, insert. Just checking again. Okay, waypoint number 5. And our last waypoint is north 53143, insert west 2018, insert. Okay, the loading is checked, down to 0 and ready for nav. Come over here, nav on 1, 2 and 3. The ready nav lights out. Loading is checked, nav mode mix. Another thing I should have done before entering the waypoints is press the remote button on each INS to sync all the coordinates, but that's okay. Okay, so the loading is checked, nav mode mix. Part of the before start checklist, we now put our batteries on. We are all but ready to start. The overhead is checked for the time being. And we are ready for engine start. Okay, so engine idle switches, they go to high. We have enough air pressure for engine start. Start clearance is obtained. We are starting engine number 3. Notice the N2 is spooling up. At 13% N2, I'll open the fuel flow valve. And I'm going to run the engine in debug for 1 minute. We'll hit the chrono and time 1 minute. The reason being is because the engine needs to spool up. If the engine was run last within the last 5 minutes or 10 hours, it must be run in this condition for 1 minute. N2 then stabilizes at about 30%, and the engine, for the same reason that on the Max, 737 Max, the engines, they spool up a lot slower. Okay, that is successful. Starting number 2. Hit the chrono. Okay, 13% N2 is starting engine number 2. Okay, engine number 2's N2 value is stabilized at 30%. And just wait until 1 minute. Okay, engine number 2 is now spooling up. Okay, hydraulics are coming online now. Notice all the control surfaces, they now return to their commanded position. Number 2, number 3, they're both running. And now we can start our pushback. So we need to hit the brake fans and we can commence the pushback. Okay, the pushback, we can now lower the visor.
Visor's coming down.
We don't lower the nose just yet. And now we can proceed to start the main 2 engines. First we access the air bleed control panel. Switch all the engine bleed valves to open. All the cross feeds go open. We'll shut the air conditioning and now we can cross bleed start the rest of the other 2 engines. Okay, starting number 4 and number 1. I'll reset the chrono. Okay, let's press the mech jam button, which tripped off due to a lack of hydraulic pressure. Okay, let's open the fuel shutoff valves for engines number 1 and number 4. They'll now stabilize at 30%. Start the chrono. We'll run these also in debug condition for 1 minute. It's all about the temperature gradients. Okay, brake set to park. Engines number 1 and number 4 are now spooling up. We have all engines running. We're now going to perform a flight control check. I'm going to turn on the electric trims I'm not going to test the full travel of the trims today, but I'm going to set our trim to 1.5 for takeoff. Like so. The trims are checked. Now we're going to test the flight control for each channel. We're checking the mechanical channel now. Pull up, full nose down, and left and right. And test the rudder. Okay, now the green channel. Test the green channel. Reset them. Flight control check again. This time it's much more responsive. And finally the blue channel. Okay, now stab and feel, auto stab 1, set to engage, and auto stab 2, and artificial feel 1 and artificial feel 2 are set to engage. Notice that they remain engaged. Let's finally clear up the overhead panel. Now we can set our auto ignition back to on. Seatbelt signs are on. It's okay. Throttle master is set to main. We can now put the drain masters on and the pressure static heaters on. And the overhead panel is checked and set. Also the engine idle switches can go back to low. Also move the ground chocks so we can start our taxi. Now the fuel, we need to move the fuel to 53 center of gravity. So my load limit is set for a transfer and I'm going to move the fuel aft. Electrics also checked, hydraulics are checked. I'm going to turn on all the auxiliary engine feed pumps. Also the low protection, put that on. The pumps for tanks 5A and 7A, we put them on as well for de-aeration. And once the transfer is done, I will put the pumps, the de-air on for tank 11. Okay, the fuel transfer is on the way. Now time for the taxi. So set parking brakes back to normal and begin the taxi. Okay, taxi checklist, nose and
Nose
dice
5.
are down 5 degrees. Nose wheel steering is reset. Anti-skid is checked and set. Continue the taxi while closely monitoring the fuel. Okay, the fuel is coming very close to the up limit. I'm going to stop the transfer now so that I don't forget later. Now we are taxiing on idle thrust. The tendency to gain thrust in the Concorde is tremendous. And we can also monitor our ground speed as well. We're currently taxiing at 8 knots. And also the taxi turn lights can go on. We're nearly coming to the end of our very short taxi. Let me stop here and continue on with the final checks. Okay, reverse air shut-off test. Remove these two rotary selectors to E and we put these to test. Okay, mid-travel forward. Observe that N2 doesn't increase by more than 6%. Idle and then idle reverse. And cancel. Seats and harnesses next, which are locked, power off and secured. And now we can proceed on to the before takeoff checks. Just check the flight engineer's panel once again. Everything is set. Oh yeah, the cross blades can go off now and the air conditioning can come back on. That's why we do these checks. The transfer is complete, so I can put the D air on for tanks 11, for tanks 9, and we don't have any fuel in tanks 5, 6, 7 or 8. Fuel is checked, pressurization is checked, hydraulics and electrics are checked, ground bypass. Okay, so the before takeoff checks now. Can continue our taxiing. The takeoff briefing, there's no change to the briefing. And also now our transponder can go to TARA. Weather radar can remain off. We have clear weather today. Reheat selected for right. And master warning is recalled, acceptable system status, and inhibited for takeoff. And the takeoff monitor must be armed to monitor the contingency rating. It's always beneficial to line up slightly left of the runway because of the tendency to yaw to the right. Finally, takeoff CG switch is normal and N1 limiter set to 88%. And we're ready for the takeoff. Okay. 3, 2, 1, now.
Yes, rebuilding. 100 knots.
Engine failure.
Stop, stop. V1.
V1,
Rotate.
deploy and no return. Rotate.
V2.
Positive climb
Gear coming
gear
out,
up.
positive climb. 240 knots.
Pitch to 18 to
3,
20 degrees.
2, 1.
Noise.
Your throttles.
Throttling back to TLA.
After takeoff checks, please.
Landing gear.
Up, lights off, neutral.
Okay, after takeoff checks, landing gear up, lights off, neutral. Master warning, recalled. These are performed by memory in real world. Taxi turn lights can go off. Climb rating can go to climb. We're now on flight rating. And now we're going to pitch for speed for 250 knots. Okay, the radial is active and we're going to track the 258 radial until London 7 DME. 4,000 feet, we can now go to 95% N2 and pitch up for speed 95%. Okay, we're London 7 DME.
Altitude alert, 1000 to go.
Make the turnover to 271. All the while we're pitching for speed. $6,000 feet, 7,000 feet, 101%. We're now approaching 8,000 feet. 8,000 feet max climb power. And now we'll raise
Nose
the
coming up,
visor,
nose coming up, nose coming up, nose.
Now we'll raise the visor, nose, and accelerate now. Okay, we're approaching Woodley, and shortly then we will be flying direct to Crompton. We'll set our altitude. Okay, let's fly direct to the Crompton VOR. We're quite light today, so I'll bring our thrust down. Climbing extremely fast at a very high rate of climb. Okay, now we'll follow the INS route and engage the autopilot to take over. Okay, so autopilot will engage. Pitch hold is selected. Now we'll track the INS route. We'll select our speed as well. IAS hold, climb, and now altitude acquire. And prime the auto throttles to take over. We're now leveling off at 25,000 feet. Also, as part of the after takeoff checks, we can return engine control schedule to normal. Secondary nozzles are modulating. Select them to open fully. And the seatbelt signs can go off also now. And we can put the ADS and probe heaters back to ADS. Also, another good scan is of the overhead panel. Coming up on Mach 0.7, we're going to move the fuel aft. And the fuel now should start going aft to remain within the center of gravity limits. So we're currently cruising at 25,000 feet and at Mach 0.9 which is faster than most other commercial aircraft. The INS shows that we are between waypoints 3 and 4, and our ground speed is 538 knots. We've only been 6 minutes in the air and we've already reached 25,000 feet, which is very impressive. Check the pressurization, the cabin altitude is climbing, and the differential pressure and the cabin altitude are within range. Okay, the center of gravity is coming back within limits. Electrics are checked, hydraulics all checked and set. And now we can just enjoy the view. Okay, CG of 55% is reached. We'll stop the fuel transfer, and now we will drain out the wingtip tanks. So we'll open the trim drain pipe and interconnect valves. And now fuel starts to move from tanks 5A into 5 and 7A into 7. You can also check where we are so we can plan our descent. We're still between waypoints 3 and 4, and the distance and time to the next waypoint is 45 nautical miles, which is 5 minutes. Okay, so we're reaching the Trent viewer. This might be a good time to start our descent if we are to make it to Manchester. So to start with, before descent, we're going to check our warning and landing display. Finally, we're going to open the engine recirc valves and start our descent. So you disengage your auto throttles, ensure the altitude hold is selected, and now we'll pull the thrust back to retard power to idle. At 350 knots, I'm going to select IAS hold and the aircraft will then pitch down to maintain 350 knots. We can command a higher descent rate if required by arming the reverse thrust on the inboards number 2 and number 3, which will give us descent rates up to 11,000 feet per minute. We'll dial in now 11,000 feet and altitude require, and prime the auto throttles to take over when we level off. Okay, so tanks 5A and 7A have totally drained out to the bare minimum. We'll shut the pumps down now. And the fuel that is now gone in tanks 5 and 7 can be used to feed the engine feed pumps, engine feed tanks. It's necessary to turn both on because the left-hand pump for tank 5 feeds engine feed tank number 1 and the right-hand pump for tank 5 feeds number 2. Similarly for number 3 and number 4. Okay, we're now reaching our last waypoint, and at this point I'll make my own vectors towards the runway. So let me track this waypoint, which is at select change our heading and move to track heading. Also rad INS switches back to radio navigation and it'll track the heading and we'll line up with our waypoint. And then from there we'll turn directly and come across the ILS and land on runway 23 right. We'll dial in the ILS frequency, which is 109.50, decimal 50 on both sides. And the course is 231. Okay, we can now change our engine control schedule to approach, and we can shut the engine recirc valves. Let's ensure that the seatbelt sign can go on now. And we're less than 15 minutes to landing. The pumps, the fuel quantity in tanks 5 and 7 are now drained, so we'll shut those pumps down and we'll now move our fuel forward. So to do that, we reduce our load limit for tank 11 to 0. And now we can increase our load limit for tank 9. And now the CG will move forward. Okay, we've leveled off at 11,000 feet. We're going to continue to slow down. Now it's about 250 knots. Let's fly out further to this waypoint to ensure that we have descended sufficiently for our approach. Can continue descending now to, let's say, 5,000 feet. Okay, now let's turn back to intercept the localizer. Fuel is still moving forward, and also we need to set our pressurization to our elevation, landing elevation, which is 250 feet. Can now lower the visor for better field of view, and also now we can also check our landing data. So we have a VREF for 154 knots, and we'll add on about 7 knots for better performance. So 161 will be our final landing speed. Okay, let's slow to about 220 knots, getting ready to approach. So we have about very few minutes left till we land. Let's continue to descend now to 3,000 feet. We'll descend at a steady 800 feet per minute, and we'll continue slowing down. Okay, let's prime VOR lock as well to lock onto the localizer. And let's bring our nose down to nose 5. Okay, VOR, we've locked onto the VOR and we're turning towards it now. I'll just descend further to capture the glide slope. And let's start to slow down to our final approach speed. Okay, let's bring the visor down fully. Let's bring the gear down. We're a bit high on the approach, so we'll hasten our descent. Coming in quite steep. Okay, the glide slope is coming within range, and then we'll capture it. Okay, glide slope capture. Capture the glide slope. Okay, before landing, check the gears down, the auxiliary inlets are open, the visor is fully down, our go round altitude is set. The radio altimeter is active, and we can put our landing lights on as well. Then at 20 feet, I'm going to start the flare and gently touch down onto the runway. Okay, and touchdown. Reverse thrust and set our brakes. Not to mention, we should put the brake fans on. Okay, 60 knots. Okay, we stopped entirely. Okay, reverse lights out, and now we'll continue and taxi to our final parking spot. Okay, we can go back to nose 5 and we can put our taxi turn lights on. We can put the landing lights off. Also, we're quite light, so we can shut down our outboard engines. And to do so, we just have to close the fuel flow to those engines. Okay, so engines number 1 and number 4 are spooling down. We can also put our flight control inverters off. We can put our emergency generator ground bypass to auto. Throttle masters also can go off. Auto ignition can also go off. Okay, our fuel is also transferred forward sufficiently to avoid ourselves tipping backwards. Okay, now stop the transfer. And now we finally approach our parking spot. We'll then do a complete shutdown. Okay, brakes set to park, and now we'll complete our shutdown. So raise the nose, and let's go to the overhead panel. The throttle masters can go off. The seatbelt signs, no smoking, we can also put off now. The nav lights, anti-collision, they can go off. The ADS and standby heaters, they go off. Pressure static heaters off. Drain masters, we can return back to their off position. And then lighting as required. Auto ignition is off. Engine waiting to take off for the next flight. Also, the hydraulics can go back to the mechanical channel, and we can disengage our auto stab and auto feel as well. Windshield de-ice is off. Transparency de-ice and demist is also off. Now coming over here, we can throttles at idle, brakes are set to park, and now we'll come over to the flight engineers and request ground air and ground power. Same as before the ground air, we open the number 2 and number 3 cross blades, and shut the bleed valves, and the air conditioning can remain on. The pressurization we can now reset to 0 feet, and engine control schedule goes back to normal. The air intakes and ramps are fine. We can now turn our control display, our multi-selector units, MSUs, to off. Coming here to the fuel, same thing as we did before, we put all the pumps and the overrides back off, as well as the inlets. And the low fuel protection also. And finally, all the engine feed pumps as well. Okay, the electrics we can check. We can now close the bus tie breaker and ensure ground power is connected. And now, since the engines have been running at idle for about 5 minutes, we can now shut down the remaining 2 engines.
Nose coming up, visors coming.
And close off the hydraulics as well for the safety of the people on the ground. And we can put the batteries off as well. Okay, so the aircraft will now return to the cold and dark state, how I initially found it. And finally, the taxi turn lights as well. So now we're back at cold and dark. We're connected to ground power services and ground air. The passengers can start to onboard. And this is probably the fastest journey from London to Manchester that they would have ever encountered. All thanks to the Concorde. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the flight and stay tuned for more Concorde adventures. We are now over and out.